Welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast. F1 content around the globe.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wimbo Worldwide F1 podcast, episode 19. And today I have a guest with me from New Zealand. He is the biggest F1 YouTuber I know, apart from maybe the race. And the first time I reached out to him was in September 2nd in 2023. So you can imagine how pleased I am to have him face to face with me. Ladies and gentlemen, the guest today is Josh Revell. Hello, Josh. How are you doing?
Very good, man. And what you demonstrated there, September 2023, is that how bad I am at replying to my DMs? Like, I know I'm bad, so. But man, it took this long for me to sort myself out here.
Yeah, at one point, the whole conversation stopped in the Instagram DMs. But then I found you on Twitter, so I tried again. And then we got a conversation going again. And then we had a date, but then I had to go to the Zandvoort Grand Prix. So we postponed again. But yeah, you're here now.
Yeah.
Let's start from the very top. How is the F1 community in New Zealand?
A little bit niche, like especially when there's no New Zealanders on the grid, which is kind of always the case. Which is why I always get so giddy when Liam Lawson gets within 300 meters of an F1 car, because we just don't have any drivers here. But it's niche for a couple of reasons. First off, it's obviously about the whole driver thing. We're invested if we've got someone to be invested in, I guess. But also, races start at very rancid times. Like this weekend, as of the recording of this video, is the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and that's one of the better positioned races for us. It starts at about 7:30 p.m. But I think Qatar and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the last two Grand Prix, they start at about 3 a.m. for us. And typically, most European races are between 1 and 2 a.m. for startings. And also, there is Formula 2 and F3 in between all of that. So basically, I'm just a full-on zombie for the rest of the week trying to recover my sleep cycle. And that's the case with a lot of us New Zealanders when it comes to Formula 1. So for those of us who stay up and watch all of it, we're dedicated. We're properly dedicated to, to the sport. So, yeah. But, I mean, you find people in this community who share that same passion and, you could just build a great rapport with them. So, yeah, I guess that's how our community is.
Well, I noticed that whenever I make a video about Liam Lawson, I get a lot of traffic from New Zealand. Like 14% of the views come from New Zealand. And you always have like 3 or 4 comments from Kiwis saying, go Liam.
Yeah. I think I remember seeing a comment from you.
I love people.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead. I'm curious to what comment I had.
I remember seeing a comment that you reposted. I think it was you. But this guy that just went on a tangent about New Zealand sporting teams and stuff like that. And you were like, what on earth is this? And I was reading it. I'm like, yeah, that's the average New Zealand sporting fan. It's like deeply insecure, have the need to say, oh, we're actually the best in the world, but in our own ways kind of thing. It's like, it's okay not to be the best at something. It's nuts to me. But, I guess the way to put it is we're passionate, but in a pathetic way. Is one way to put us New Zealand sporting fans.
Well, see, around 2000, I went backpacking, and because I wasn't sure if I would get homesick or anything, I only traveled to the British Isles. So I went to Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and I thought, if I ever get sick of it, then an hour and a half and I'm home, which is much harder if you're in New Zealand because that's a day away. But I met loads and loads of Kiwis and Australians, and I always loved how laid back these people are, how they all are. But I also noticed there's a bit of rivalry between the Kiwis and the Aussies. So one night we were sitting by a fireplace, and they all started slagging each other with jokes. And one joke I remembered, and I want to tell you this. There's an Australian guy, and he finds out that you can be a shepherd in New Zealand because there's a lot of sheep. So he goes over and he starts being a shepherd, and all his fellow shepherds, Kiwis, they sit around a campfire at night and they talk. And then the Australian goes, "Yeah, there's not many Sheilas here, is it? So what do you do for women?" And the Kiwi says, "Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. You get a nice sheep, you take it behind the shed, and you have your way with it." And he goes, "Oh man, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to." Right, but as the weeks go on and the months go on, he gets more and more, in the mood, and yeah, all of a sudden the sheep, they start looking not so bad to him. So one night, he grabs one, takes it behind the shed, starts doing the business, and then he sees 3 heads poking around from the shed. It's the other shepherds, the Kiwi shepherds, and they all start laughing. And he goes, "What? What the fuck? What? Like, you said you were doing this." And then one of the Kiwis goes, "Yeah, but that's an ugly one."
Jesus. Yeah, it's a classic joke between Aussies and Kiwis. We're always getting that whole sheep shagging joke from the Aussies. It's that whole sort of sibling rivalry where if it's just between us Aussies and Kiwis, we'll take the piss out of each other relentlessly. Like, it doesn't end. It is totally relentless, no holds barred, all that kind of stuff. But the instant another country enters the fray, us Aussies and Kiwis will team up with each other and be like, "Oh, nah. This my brothers and sisters." And it's, it is truly the definition of sibling rivalry, us Aussies and Kiwis. So, hence why so many people bail from this extremely expensive country to go live over there, despite all the snakes and spiders and Australians.
Okay, so Formula One drivers from New Zealand. The biggest name, obviously, is Bruce McLaren, and you still see him on the grid every race. So, do you know much about that? And is he a big hero in New Zealand? Are there museums with his stuff?
I mean, there are plenty of places and schools named after him. I mean, there's a retirement village, literally a baseball throw away from where I live. I probably shouldn't have said that, because now that's really narrowed down where I live. But his name is pretty much everywhere. His legacy is certainly, it certainly lives on here. Whether or not the general public is conscious of the fact that the McLaren brand is, technically speaking, a New Zealand brand, I'm not sure many people do realize that in this country. Probably because it has been based in Britain. No, it was founded by a Kiwi, but it has been based in Britain its entire time. So it probably hasn't registered with a lot of people. Kiwis are very sort of in the moment when it comes to who their sporting heroes are. You know, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to tell you who our only world champion was. You know, Denny Holm in 1967. No one could tell you that off the street because it's not really our niche. The only thing they'd be able to tell you is, oh, Liam Lawson is driving for Red Bull. It's like, technically not, but, you know, like that kind of tells you where they're at with regards to, you know, the general public knowledge, I guess. But at least, you know, the legacy of Bruce does live on in this country to some degree. And I think that's important that he has been acknowledged in that light because he pioneered quite a few things when it came to not just strictly Formula One, but, you know, other bits of racing history and also here in New Zealand. So, yeah, I guess that's how it is.
Yeah. No, it's nice to have these heroes, and hopefully Liam Lawson can become the next New Zealand hero. He said in the Red Flags podcast that he wants the national anthem of New Zealand for McLaren. But as you just explained, it's always been a British team.
Yeah, it's like, I remember I advocated for that myself at one point, where it's like, come on, it was founded by a New Zealander in the early stages. Apart from Teddy Mayer, it was run by New Zealanders. It just so happened to be in the UK. So basically, a place of business run primarily by New Zealanders in the UK, that's every pub in the UK. But, you know, again, it's where it's registered, I guess.
But then again,
then again, what, like
New Zealand,
Alpine is registered in Britain, but would they play the French national anthem if they? Yeah, I don't know. Like it's a weird one.
Yeah, but you know, I was just continuing that trail of thought here. You know, New Zealand was founded by Dutch people, so the Dutch anthem would do as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Abel Tasman.
There's a lot of Dutch history in New Zealand. Yeah.
yeah. There is quite a bit of it for sure.
So, do you still have a lot of people with Dutch surnames here or over there in New Zealand?
I mean, I think one of our bigger drivers, Shane van Gisbergen, that's one.
Yeah.
There's Chris Vanderdrift as well. Off the top of my head, I'm just forgetting some of these drivers, but there is definitely some Dutch influence here for sure. Unfortunately, we haven't quite gotten the full, you know, Max Verstappen level talent here yet. Some people would like to say Liam is that, and it's like, no. Look, I love Liam, but if you stick him alongside Max next year, he's gonna get massacred. I'm not saying that because you're here. I'm saying that because can anyone take him on at this point? Like, I would just prefer that Liam stays in VCARB for a year or two, develop and hone the skills, and then see if he can go up against the might that is Max. But no, it's
the fact that you're pointing this out, you know, that he's going to get massacred by Max. If next season he would be besides Max and he stays within 2-3 tenths each qualifying, or you know, even closer on the smaller tracks, you know, and he finishes just a couple of positions down, or even when there's a possibility he gets a few podiums, you know, that's a big improvement from Perez, and that's what Red Bull wants. The problem with Gasly and Albon was that Max was only 18 and 19, and Albon and Gasly were already 20 and 21. And, they both were under the impression that they could beat Max, and that's what killed them in the end, mentally. But yeah, Liam Lawson, he's going up against a almost four-time world champion, and the expectations are way different. So I'd like to see him in the Red Bull seat.
Yeah, I would as well. It's just like I don't know. It's with Gasly, Albon, and Checo, when they all came in, there was a lot of promise around all of them. We didn't think I don't think a lot of people expected them to be up with Max, but be again at least within 2 to 3 tenths. And every time it fell apart. So and I think with Albon especially, it was all done in haste. Gasly probably less so.
Yeah.
But I really wish Marco would stop with these knee-jerk reactions and signing drivers. He's even doing it right now with Colapinto, who, I've been saying for the last 4 years was a talent because he came over here for the Toyota Racing Series, the Summer Formula Series, and it's one thing to read results, but it's another to actually go there and see these guys. And he beat Yuki Tsunoda, who was in the best team with the best engineers and all that kind of stuff. And he almost beat Liam as well. And Franco was, I don't want to say worst team, because Kiwi Motorsport's a good team, but it was at that time nowhere near as good as M2 competition. And again, every one of us that were watching it's just like, holy crap, this guy's good. Like, he should not be up there. He's beating these Red Bull guys, and he's just come out of Spanish F4, and he's done well in every junior series that he had done since then. But there was a point where he didn't have enough money for Formula Regional. Never mind 3 million euros for F2 every year. Thankfully, the Argentine government and big sponsors there started to back him. And it was only this year in Formula 2 where he had enough money to test the cars. And it's like, hang on, so he's been doing all these results without testing? So I've always been high on the guy, but it took him, getting that chance in Formula 1 because Logan Sargent drowned. It took him this chance for people to be like, oh, he's pretty good. It's like, yeah, that's what happens when you watch these races and don't rely on Wikipedia articles, Marco. Like, it's, yeah, again, the whole knee-jerk reaction thing. One race he's like, oh, this guy's going to go in. Next race, oh no, this guy's going to go in. And he wonders why all of these experiments fail. It's extraordinarily frustrating. And, with Liam, this whole thing could have been avoided if he, if Marco stuck to his guns, And I realize this puts us a contrast because, the 2023 AlphaTauri seat was either going to go to a Dutch guy or a Kiwi guy. But yeah, I think it's a bit funny that Marco is entrusted with finding the talent for the Red Bull team, and then almost immediately seems to just sort of abandon that sort of support. It's just weird to me.
I think the internal struggles have caused for Helmut Marko to not be able to do what he always did, and that's just chuck young drivers in and see if they'll float. It was Horner that got Perez with Carlos Slim's sponsor money, and Daniel Ricciardo with the Visa Cash App money involved. Um, that had very little to do with racing qualities itself. Although it would have been a dream story if Daniel Ricciardo would have climbed up and become his old 2018 self again. You never know that up front, but a lot of these
Yeah.
motives were based on money. And then I'm still trying to figure out why all of a sudden the money is important, but that's probably something to do with the future plans of the Red Bull team, whether it's going to be taken over by Ford or there's something going on where it's important now to make more money where they never used to care about money. So
Well, I mean,
that's my thoughts
like,
about it anyway.
yeah, I mean, if Red Bull lose 20 million in the Constructors' Championship because Checo couldn't get results, but his sponsors can net you 50 million, then like, yeah, it's one of those, well, yeah, we didn't get that, but we got this kind of thing. And it seems Max doesn't really need a wingman at this point. But yeah, and like, it's Rebel are extraordinarily lucky to have Max at this point with the way that he's in at the moment. Sure, Lando has made life. He's taken immense trouble to make life as difficult for himself as he possibly can, but like, very few can max it the way that Max does. To a point where he doesn't really need a wingman. But yeah, you're playing with fire. What they're doing, they're playing with fire here. And it's just like, at some point you're gonna need that wingman, for your championship contender. And the way Checo is right now, he hasn't been that for God knows how many races. So, yeah, you look at Red Bull and you're like, what are you guys doing?
I sometimes think that they let go of Albon way too quickly. The 2021 car was way more competitive, and he was doing great in the sim that year. Because when Albon was demoted to a sim driver, and maybe they should have given him the time that Perez has got since 2021. The discussion about Perez being good enough for Red Bull has been going on for 3 years now. Never as bad as this season, but still pretty bad.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, someone who I thought, like, I was glad that Checo got the seat in 2021 because I thought he deserved it with how he had driven in his Force India days. But someone who I probably would have picked for Max's teammate based on similarities of driving styles was Kevin Magnussen. And there'll be people who be saying, what, really, that guy? Why would you want him? Well, again, similar driving styles in terms of how, they both are. When K-Mag's on it, he is blistering fast. And you want a feisty teammate, you're gonna get that with K-Mag. So that's who I personally would have picked at that moment based on who was a free agent and blah blah blah. But they stuck with Checo, and there were times in 2021 where he did defend for all his might, and he was worth his weight in gold. But 2021, that was such a weird season because it was two guys that were just so far ahead of everyone else. And just they both made their teammates look like chumps. So, but now it's a different story, and the comparison is glaring, and it's like, how much longer can you continue like this?
Like I can imagine Checo not having good time either, you know.
Mm.
But he still clings on. Apparently, his father says that he's not going to leave, and he still believes that he's going to be a world champion. So it's always nice to have your father backing you up.
Hmm.
So anyway, we went on a little sidetrack here.
Mm.
How did you actually get into Formula One? That was question number 3.
I think the same as anyone else, I guess. Just gotten at an age so young that you can't really recall what was the key moment. Must have been 4 or 5, I think, because Formula One 2001 was the first game I ever had. First racing game I ever had. Then caught some of the coverage on TV, and it sort of just spiraled from there. I think the first race that I remember seeing was 2002, 2003 German Grand Prix. And, just sort of snowball from there, I guess. Just sort of watching whatever racing I could at that age, and especially whatever Formula One I could at that age. And yeah, from there on, it's just the boring old case of spending way too much time invested in the sport instead of doing what all other children do at that age and going outside and having friends, all that kind of stuff.
You just watched videotapes of Formula One races.
Yeah,
You probably read a lot of books as well,
Formula
magazines.
I don't even know if I had Formula One tapes back then, because especially back then, Formula One's marketing was terrible. But no, I just basically watched whatever I could back then. But yeah, like it all stems from just what stuff I was fed as a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, and yeah, just latched onto it ever since.
Hey, so you follow F2 and F3 closely as well, and any other motorsports like Australian supercars?
Yeah, definitely that. Sort of whatever I have time for now, but I guess it's kind of waned because doing what I do on a constant basis, I just get so sick of the sport because, I'm constantly studying it, constantly working toward it. And then it's just like, oh, it's another Grand Prix weekend. Okay. Got to stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. again, all that kind of stuff. So, my interests go sort of everywhere, I guess. There will be some key sports, like, as you mentioned, that I will watch. Otherwise, may keep some, I may tune into highlights or whatever if they come available to me. WEC has become really good lately. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of motorsport, not a hell of a lot of time to watch it. Otherwise, yeah, I'll also keep an eye on the junior series as well.
Okay, good. No, I remember a video you made. I think it was you about an Australian supercar rally race or something, and then there was something happened in the last lap, and another pair of drivers overtook the drivers, and they won. And then the crowd started booing and started throwing cans on the podium. And then the guy who won said, "You guys are all a bunch of assholes." Does that ring a bell?
Yep, 1992 Bathurst. That was so basically. in touring cars around the world, the regulations change. And in 1992 in Australia, they had Group A rules. So you had BMW 6 Series, you had Ford Sierras, all those turbo monsters that, kept on wheel spinning up to fifth gear and were probably even wheel spinning under brakes because they had that much power. And then you had the GTR R32, which was a beast, just pathetically fast. And they would put weight ballast on these things and it would still win. And eventually they were like, nah, screw this. We're banning this car because everyone hated it. And the Australian culture was all about Holden versus Ford. But they had one more race, which was the Bathurst 1000. And the Nissan was dominating all day. And then with about 20-ish laps to go, I think it was, the rain came down. And despite the four-wheel drive system, the Nissan crashed and sort of ripped the front suspension off. He tried to get around. It didn't work. And at that point, it looked like, okay, well, one of the local Fords is going to win it. But then they red flagged the race. It went back a lap. And the Nissan won. And the crowd were apoplectic. They were enraged by it because they felt, well, one of the Fords should have won. So, it's a mixture of they felt someone else should have won and they also hated the Nissans. So, yeah, they go up in the podium. And at that time, the guy who said those remarks, Jim Richards, he normally is a dude who's pretty damn gentlemanly. He doesn't curse at people. He doesn't, insult people. But in that race, the conditions were appallingly dangerous, and his good friend and 1967 world champion Denny Hulme had died on the track due to a heart attack, and he just learned about that before going out on the podium, and he just saw red, and he said to the crowd, "You're a pack of assholes." So, yeah, it's one of the most famous moments in Australian touring car history that is still known today, because of just the hostility going both ways. And even the drivers in third, who were another Nissan team, one of the drivers was just like, screw this, and was pointing the finger at the crowd. And it's just like, okay, you're all right, you still got to stand out there in that podium, so good luck.
Well, just as well there was no Twitter back then. That would have been spicy.
Imagine Twitter. Twitter for the 1989 and 1990 Japanese Grand Prix. Oh, my God.
Oh, Lord. That's the two incidents with Senna and Prost.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So have you ever been to a race? To a Formula One race?
I've been to two. Both in 2022. Went to the Australian Grand Prix and the Belgian Grand Prix. And
nice.
it was Melbourne was crazy. You just couldn't move. It was so packed out. It was insane how many people there were. But it felt the same as any other Australasian racing event that I've ever been to. Going to the Belgian Grand Prix, that was something different. Entirely different. I was just in awe of the fact that a track that I've been seeing on TV, the famous Eau Rouge, was right there in front of my eyes. And something that I was thinking when walking around the circuit was, this feels smaller than it does on TV. On TV, it seems vast. And then you get there, and it's just like, whoa, hang on. I've just walked from one side of the track to the other in like what 15 minutes. How'd that happen? But it's it's quite the atmosphere there now. And how the hell I ended up in the Aston Martin corporate area in that race after some of the snide comments I made toward the Strolls over the years is beyond me. But that was good fun. Would I go back to another race?
You didn't meet them, did you?
I actually did see Stroll. I saw Lawrence Stroll in the paddock. And the best way I could describe him is that he looked like if a mafia boss had been turned into a zombie, because he sort of kind of lurched around a little bit. Like he had this sort of slump to him and sort of meandered around the paddock. And I guess with, how much that guy works, I couldn't really blame him for meandering about like that. But I thought he's right there. So that was interesting. Would I go to another Grand Prix again? I think I would have to line it up with another trip that I take, because the unspoken truth about being trackside for a race is that unless you've got a TV screen right in front of you and maybe some comms hooked into your ear, you don't know what the hell's going on in a race. Like, I think even we had a TV screen right in front of us for Melbourne, and we didn't know what the hell was going on because, the commentary was always drowned out by the cars. So you're just watching cars go by, and it's just like, oh, who won? Oh, that guy, apparently. So, like, yeah, it would have to be...
Yeah, I was in Zandvoort this year, and we sat right in front of a TV screen, and the times lit up perfectly. I was in Austria, where it was much more difficult, where we were sitting. That was a year earlier. Yeah, I feel if you go to the track, it's more to meet loads of people and celebrate and have a bit of a party, more than actually watching the race. Because at home, I'm sitting in front of this computer and I have a multi-viewer for F1 now. I've got it on, and then I've got Max on the radio. And then if I see that, like, say, Russell is about to overtake Hamilton, I think, oh, this can get spicy. I turn Russell's radio on as well to hear what's going on, if he's allowed to overtake and stuff. So whenever something like that's happening, and you can't do that at the track. You just you're there for the atmosphere, to be amongst a lot of other Formula One fans, but to actually follow the races, you're better off at home.
Yeah, 100%.
Don't you agree? So this season, are you enjoying this season? I'd say it's better than last year's seasons anyway. Even though my favorite driver was winning everything last year.
Yeah, the last two seasons were not good, I think is one way to put it. Well, no, that's not fair. The beginning of 2022 was amazing. Like the battles between Max and Charles. I want that every day, every year, because those two they'll race each other so freaking hard, but they won't kill each other. So you'll get the best racing of all time. It's a bit like watching Senna versus Villeneuve, which I understand is kind of blasphemous. But if you wanted that dream, that dream sort of lineup of Gilles Villeneuve versus Ayrton Senna, you kind of got that here a little bit with their driving styles and how hard they race, the level of talent that they've got. But unfortunately, it died away because Ferrari had this cancerous, pig-headed piece of crap in its organization that absolutely tore it to shreds. That was called Mattia Binotto. They got rid of him now, and they're starting to resurge back to where they should be. So hopefully next year we do get more of Charles versus Max, because while this year has been better than most, Lando has made life incredibly difficult for himself, and it should be much closer. And, I think they said that had he not made the mistakes that he did, at the very least, it should be like neck and neck between he and Max going into these last 3 rounds. And you want that, don't you? Even though the McLaren has been the best car on the grid since Miami, at least in comparison to the Red Bull, it hasn't seemed that way. Like, I saw this asinine comment from Karun Chandok who said Max won in the first 5 races of the year or whatever. It's like, mate, the gap between Max and Lando is bigger than what it was in Miami. It's like, how can you have the better car for the better part of almost 20 races and you do nothing with it? Like, and even in the times where it looked like he, had a 10 out of 10 performance, Lando I'm speaking about, in Zandvoort and Singapore, he still made life difficult for himself, Like, he almost crashed 3 times in Singapore. One of those circumstances, like, we're talking a microsecond away from being out. And it's like,
Yeah.
Come on. So he needs to bring that in and hone that all in, because, we went from having potentially a great tussle for the championship to it being over with 2 rounds to spare, which is extremely disappointing, because even though Max can go over the line sometimes, when he is pushed, like in 2021, especially up against a Merc, which no one had any hope against, you just saw otherworldly stuff from Max. So that's why I want Max to be pushed, because you see some special stuff from that guy. Such as that, the great Saudi Arabian quali lap, which, if he completed, would have been an absolute lap of the gods. But you probably wouldn't have got that from him if he wasn't, in that mode of, I've got to get this lap in, So I'd love to see him pushed by another driver, for that, because you just, like I said, it's, you start to see some special stuff from drivers when, they're in that mode.
I don't think Lando Norris is the guy for that job, to push Max. He had an interview with the race. I read it today, and he says that the McLaren car wasn't that fast the whole season. Everybody says that it was the best car since Miami, but there were definitely races that they weren't the best. And then everybody talks about his mistakes, and he says, "Yeah, I made 1 or 2 mistakes, but for a lot of other mistakes, or that people say that's my mistake, there were other reasons for it." And then the bad starts, he listed all the starts that he was actually really quick, but it was just unfortunate that the guy beside him was a little quicker. And then what I noticed is that Scott Mitchell-Mann, the guy who interviewed him, was sort of right. He wrote down his answers, and then he filled in a lot of things afterwards. Explaining what Lano just said there. And I personally think that's the kind of coddling that happens with Lando Norris. He gets way too protected by his team, by the loads and loads of 15-year-old girls that are his fans. Instead of letting him sort it out himself, and to make him grow from it. Like at one point he said, I've never changed. Well, I've changed a little bit. So I was like, what is it? And he approaches races that way as well. It's like, today I'm going to have a good start. Yes, I'm off the line very quickly. Oh, the shifting from 2 to 3 went a little bit slow. Oh, I lost a position again. It's all wishy-washy. And I think, he's not that guy. If we want to have a brilliant championship next season, and I think it's going to happen, we need a competitive Red Bull and an even more competitive Ferrari, and then Charles and Max can fight it out.
Yeah, like it's
What do you think?
That's one of the things that's extraordinarily frustrating, not just purely about Lando, just in general nowadays. I don't understand why people are so adverse to getting, I guess, a lot of the criticism hasn't quite been constructive. A lot of it's been quite, derogatory. But, when I've criticized Lando, it's come from a place of, come on, man. Like, he's had some extraordinarily good driving this year. Like, we've seen that. Like, this is the thing. Yeah, we'll criticize some of the stuff that he does, but we also know how good Oscar Pastry is. And look at the gap between those two on a consistent basis. People say, oh, Piastri is better and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, well, in 2/3 of the races, Lando is 30 seconds up the road. Like, that's something that not a lot of people are talking about. So Lando is driving good in the sense of he's got speed, but it takes more than speed to be a world champion. It requires a lot of boxes to be ticked. And the mindset of, I don't need to change, and of, like this coddling and protecting. Look, if you want to support your drivers, support them. There's nothing wrong with that. And protect them, yes, when there's unwarranted criticism and slandering and all that stuff. I understand that. But where we're coming from is that he doesn't learn from the mistakes and probably doesn't want to learn from the mistakes. And it's just like it continues on and on over again. And like, it doesn't stop. Just constant mistakes all over the shot. He ends up wondering, oh, why is this happening? Blah, blah, blah. Like, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. There's all kinds of noise going on in this room. But yeah, it's just, there's just frustration that people seem to look at constructive criticism as if it's an insult. It's not. There's a want for people to get better here. And if you put yourself in an echo chamber and say, oh, nothing's wrong, then you're never going to improve. And that's how it's going to be for Lando, in this situation. It's like, look, dude, you got the speed, but you need to use this thing that you were born with, hopefully, provided it hasn't been replaced with the silver spoon you were born with, that's called a brain. This thing up here, that sort of helps you micromanage things in the race. Look, slow your freaking head. And by this point, you know how Max races. Turn the damn thing on its head and learn how to race against that. Charles has learned how to race against that. Why can't you? Like, there needs to be a bit of self-reflection here. There needs to be a bit of, okay, look, I've got the speed. I just got to get the smarts now. And as long as he doesn't view that as an insult, which he really should not, no one should, then that will be the key toward beating one of the greatest drivers that I've personally ever seen in my life.
Yeah, he's special. Do you think Max is going to win next season?
I don't know. It's really difficult to say at this point. Charles will figure into the championship big time. McLaren, okay, so potentially. Yeah, McLaren potentially, although I don't know why, but with Lando gives off shades of Mansell in the sense that, look, he's fast, but he does get coddled quite a lot. His stock does get pushed up quite a lot by media pundits because there is that sort of that rapport, from people that want to see him succeed. And look, I said this in my recent video about the British bias thing. It's like, look, British bias does exist because we're all freaking biased. everyone's got a bias, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just got to try and hone it in as much as you can if you're a journalist going out to more countries than most. Like, no one from Australasia is going to listen to the Swedish commentary, so no one's going to give a crap about what the Swedish commentators say with Marcus Ericsson. But, they will care about what Sky Sports F1 says about Lewis or Lando, for example, because the views shared in the UK are not necessarily representative of what they are over here. So they have that with Lando a bit, and it does. They do a good job of honing it in, but sometimes it does sort of slip. But it's very reminiscent of Mansell, where they want him to succeed, but it's probably going to take that great circumstance for him to be able to beat some of those monster drivers around him, I guess. But if McLaren continue in this trajectory, if Lando, learns from his mistakes, then he's in for a good chance next year. Red Bull have got too many problems at the stage where, unless McLaren and Ferrari are neck and neck next year, and don't forget Mercedes either, because I'll explain this in a second. But unless you got two teams fighting each other, Red Bull's trajectory right now is not good, and I got a feeling Max probably will not figure into the championship next year. But you never know. You never know. I think it's way too early to judge this, but I've got a prediction for who may win the championship next year based on history, which is George Russell, because every race winner who was disqualified has won the championship within a year of being disqualified from the race. So, he didn't win last year, he didn't win this year, so he could win next year, technically speaking. They are flying under the radar a little bit, and there'll be some Mercedes are nowhere this year. It's like, well, McLaren at the beginning of last year were nowhere. They were beyond nowhere. Then they got to where they are. Things can turn on their head really quickly. Sometimes a change comes about that gets you to where you need to be. It sounds a bit too simple when I put it like that, but you never know. And with Kimi Antonelli coming in next year, it'll take time for him to get bedded into the sport, because it typically does for him. Kimi's not a dude who is on it immediately, but when he is on it, he's special. He is so freaking special. So it's going to be interesting. Seriously, I want do you remember that photo that they got of PK Prost, Senna, and Mansell? Do you remember that iconic photo?
Yeah, they're all sitting on a fence.
On a wall. Yep. Yep. I want them to replicate that with Max, Charles, Fernando, and Lewis. And people will be like, what? You really view them in the same vein as that? It's like, yeah, because I'm telling you, it's like in about 10, 20 years, you're going to look back at that photo and you could be like, wow, we had them racing against each other. I promise you, you will be thinking that in 10, 20 years if you're not thinking that already. We've got some truly special drivers on the grid right now, balanced out by Lance Stroll. But, it's a special grid that we've got right now. And with some of these new guys coming in, it's like F1's in a good space talent-wise, So, yeah, I think next year, hopefully, because it seems like the roads are converging here a bit, with teams' forms starting to draw closer and closer. The performance ceiling is starting to, they're starting to reach the performance ceiling. And like they talked about how, McLaren's not been the best car all year. It's like, maybe not, but on balance it has been. But in that respect, it's a good thing, because it seems that in every round, like it was for 2010, for example, you don't know who's going to have the best car at certain rounds. So it's a bit of a free-for-all. And it's a proper championship where multiple drivers and multiple teams are just trying to get as many points as they can. And it becomes a proper world championship. And I would like that, when multiple drivers and multiple teams go for that. And probably not the ultra intense one we got in 2021, which, as great as that was, I lost hair over. I would prefer not to have that again.
So did I. Look, I think 2025 will be a great season, but you'll see halfway through the season that a lot of people will be focusing on 2026. And then if there's 2 or 3 teams in the championship fight, they'll push a little bit harder, and they'll just say, we'll try to win this season and we'll go for the new regulations. We'll try to do it both. Yeah, I have this theory, and I'm not a very technical YouTuber, but what I do see in teams is that they start off with a certain platform and they start building on it, and then the cars get faster and faster and faster. And Mercedes tried that in 2022, and they were on the wrong track. So it took them over a year to revert back to a different platform, and they're building on that, and it's showing promise. But then at certain tracks, the car starts bouncing again. So I kind of, for 2025, I don't include Mercedes in just yet, because I don't see them solving that platform problem again this quickly. Then there's Ferrari, and they went on a great trajectory, and then it stalled, and then they were getting all these kind of problems. So they reverted back a little bit, and now they're suddenly very good again. Now the Red Bull, they started off with a brilliant platform, and they started building, and then they reached their plateau, and they're still struggling with that. They reverted back. I think for 2025 they will have solved a lot of these issues, and I think with Max, with a car that's up there, he can do magic. But my money would be on Ferrari. Oh no, I already said that Ferrari for me has the best papers, because they had this plateau and then now they're going over it. McLaren, they they were really poor in 2023. Then at the end of 2023 they were pretty good, and then from Miami onwards they were the best car. But they're going to hit a plateau as well. And then I think, Red Bull and Ferrari are going to overtake them again until they've solved their plateau. But yeah, in a season with 24 races, you can see a new dominant car every 6 races, or you can have 6 races where there's 4 teams being the best car at certain points. So I'm pretty excited about 2025. I just hope that the 2026 new regulations don't play too big of a part. What do you think?
Yeah, there's not a lot I disagree with there. Like, I think for me, this sounds like an easy cop out, but it's way too early for us to sort of judge at this point as to where certain teams are going to be. I'm really going to have to see these cars. I need them to launch the cars for me to be able to tell whether or not they're going to have anything. One thing I will safely say, I think Sauber may not win the championship, which I understand it's early, but I don't think they're going to be quite up there. But, you never know with any of these other teams what they may bring to the table. So, and I think that's good that no one has got so much of a lead heading into the off season that you can almost write off the championship then and there. But, I am disappointed in some people who immediately wrote off the season just because Max won the first race. It's like, there's 23 races to go, guys. You never know. You never know. Just hang in there. Nah, championship's over. It's like, all right, if you want to go, go. And then when they caught wind that McLaren were on the way back, it's like, oh, the championship fight might be on. It's like, yeah, well, that's what happens when you have patience for a 24 race championship. So, yeah, I think even if you were to be 5-6 races in, if it's close enough, you're not going to have the faintest idea who's going to win the championship. And that's what we really want, is for, multiple teams to be duking it out. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. At this point, I haven't really got a good idea who's going to win the championship. And that's how it really should be. I think, I agree. I agree with you that we're going to be in for a great season next year, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and how do you see the 2026 regulations? Like, last news I heard is that they've sorted out quite a few problems with the engine battery. Because at one point it looked like they had to shift down to get enough energy to get the batteries loaded again and stuff like that. They called it a Frankenstein car, but at the minute things seem to be pretty positive. I don't know. What have you heard?
I haven't been focusing too much on that, to be honest with you, because like you, I'm not a very technical YouTuber. I'm all about story time and all that kind of stuff. There have been roots of, the reasons why racing hasn't been as good as it possibly can be with modern day F1 cars. And hopefully a bit of that is solved with these new cars. From what I'm hearing, it's a bit of a 50-50 as to whether or not it will. But my God, we're not going to know because things are going to change on the fly. With new regulations, you got to give them 2 to 3 years before everything's going to sort of level out. There's always with regulation changes, there's always, people who are going to be ahead of the game. And that creates an unbalanced first season, potentially second season. So there is going to be a bit of patience required from people for this. I think what's annoying is that right at the point where these newer regulations are starting to sort of get relatively better, is right at the point where we're going to start shifting over to a new one, and then the cycle repeats again. So, yeah, like, I don't know. I'm not an engineering wizard. I couldn't tell you how these things worked. So I'll just operate on vibes and say that it may be good or it may not be. Very helpful words.
Yeah, I'm sorry I asked.
It's all good.
I knew you were, full of story. You're the storyteller. Like, I love your intros of your videos. Like, I try to push as much information in the 30 seconds, hoping that everybody will stick. And you just start on a tangent about the beautiful Brazil and the rainforest, and and your subscribers know exactly what they're getting, so they accept it. I've been watching quite a few
Frankenstein
of
show
your videos
hodgepodge
lately.
of just nonsense and people to stick with it. I thank the subscribers for putting up with my nonsense.
Okay, so you haven't followed many YouTube channels to tell you how you should do it.
Nah, I've sort of just gone my own way, I guess. I do wish I had more time though, because trying to make the videos within a week is draining. And the vids are nowhere near as good as I could possibly make them. But I try my best, at least, to sort of drag as much out of them as I can, I guess. But it's the love of the stories of the sport that sort of drives it on, I guess. And yeah, there's so many stories to tell, from A1GP to a few more WTFs that are coming up. Even the odd film review, whatever. Like there's tons and tons of stories to tell out there, I guess. So yeah, I'll never run out of stuff. It's just whether I'll run out of sanity, and I've only got a finite amount of that left.
Yeah. And you've never considered taking an editor on or something, or somebody to help you with making thumbnails, or?
It's hard to do that because there's a lot of opinion with what goes on in my videos, and no one can speak for me, so I've got to be on hand with that. Outsourcing work, I tried that a couple of times and it just didn't really give me the results I wanted, I guess. And last thing you want is to put X amount of dollars into outsourcing the work and for it to not be where you want it to be. And again, you've just dumped a lot of money into that. And obviously outsourcing work is not cheap. And I don't want it to be cheap either. I want people to be paid their fair share. So it's it's a tricky one, and there are some channels out there that I have seen that just blatantly rip off channels that do put the work in, do put in the research, and use AI clickbait titles and thumbnails. There'll probably be someone who catches wind of this, and I'll just say, look, to the people who make those channels, I see you out there, and if you're not enough without it, you're never going to be enough with it. So that's all I'll say in that regard. But God, I sound incredibly salty there, didn't I? No, look, I do enjoy doing what I do. I just do wish I had a sort of, a watch that stopped time sometimes. So it's going to be like, okay, let me take a break for a couple of minutes and then I'll go back to making this. And yeah, but like there are actually a couple of project videos which I have got in the works, which are way different than anything I've ever made. That I'll just say I'll be interested to see how people react when they come out. But yeah, again, it all harkens back to the story, and I think it's a good thing, to have a variety of different approaches from different channels. Some are into the engineering, some are into paddock gossip, some have laid back podcasts, some do story time. It's good to have that variety, I guess, in the type of content we have.
Yeah, my problem is that I do a little bit of both. I do podcasts every month. I try to make an old F1 video every month, so that's pretty much kind of your storytelling videos. Then I always love FP1 Will's race reviews. So I grab an old race where lots of things happened in 2015 or 16. I make a funny race review about them, and then most of the time I make sort of news topic. So something happens in a race, and I make a video, 2 days later or 3 days later about what happened in that weekend, or whatever's playing in the minds of the Formula One fans. And it probably explains why my views go up and down so much. Because, 2 weeks ago, I made a video about Lando Norris and his comments about it being luck and not skill, the red flag situation. And that got like 55,000 views, which is 17 times more than my subscriber count. And then I made one after that about Johnny Herbert, and that got 18k views. And then I posted one yesterday about Carlos Sainz, and it has 1,000 views now, and that's probably where it's going to be stuck. So
yeah,
I had some momentum,
sometimes
but
you
it's gone
can't.
again.
Sometimes you can't figure out the YouTube algorithm. It's sort of this mystery box, I guess. It's like, okay, well, I guess these videos do well, I suppose. It's a bit of a shame that people are generally allergic to history. Like, there's a lot of great stories from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but no one cares about them because it's black and white footage. It's boring. But like you'll see some of these insane stories from those times where the racing was incredible, like just incredible stories. But because it's not from the era of Drive to Survive, it's not of the general public interest, which is incredibly frustrating. But yeah, like there'll be some historic content that people will latch onto, which I will cover. But sometimes I will sort of lick the wounds and say, well, look, this story is too good to pass up. So I've got to talk about that, whether it's in a long form video format or in a short. For example, a short I released about a week ago talked about what happened with Pedro Rodriguez in the 1967 South African Grand Prix, where the brass band that was in attendance that normally played the national anthem didn't know the Mexican national anthem, so they just played the Mexican hat dance. It's just like, dude. It's like, wow. So yeah, just there's all you can always find a story in Formula One of just like some of just the funniest stuff you would ever see in your life, or some of the most interesting stuff you'd ever see in your life. But that's why I'm not concerned with regards to how much content is left for me to cover, because apart from the fact that new stuff comes out every week, there's just an endless pit of stuff I can go back on that I can cover. So, like I said, I won't run out of ideas to talk about on this channel, but I probably will run out of sanity at some point over the next 12 months. So,
So where can people find you before you run out of sanity?
On the YouTubes.
Yeah, pretty simple to explain. Yeah. Because the channel name is just Revell.
Yeah.
So before we say goodbye, did you think of a wild prediction for the next 3 races? I want to stick to the 2024 season. Have you thought of anything wild that could happen in those 3 races, or in one of the 3 races?
Jeez. And you probably want something interesting here, rather than just the boring, Piastri will get another podium. It's like, yeah, duh. Okay. Las Vegas Grand Prix. Las Vegas Grand Prix is going to have an AlphaTauri on the podium. I'm not too sure which one, but yeah, I think the Vegas Grand Prix, and at the time of this recording, it hasn't obviously happened yet, but we're gonna get a pretty bananas race, because I know a lot of people don't like that track, but personally, and this is gonna sound blasphemous, but
I thought the race was great.
Yeah, like it may be a boring layout to some people, but apart from the fact that last kink going onto the main straight is unbelievably dangerous, and I want that changed, because if a car goes off there, they could be fired out onto the main straight and be broadsided, and we don't want to see that happening. But otherwise, the track lends itself to great racing because there's not a lot of opportunities for a car to run away in the corners. There's a lot of potential to be kept in within the 1 second because so much of it is straight and DRS. So there's that, but there's also potential for carnage just due to the nature of the circuit itself. So you can get some wacky races, but some legitimate good racing on it as well. So I'm not adverse to the track as a lot of people are, and I think we're going to see that this weekend. But now that I've said that, we're going to see an appallingly bad race, aren't we? Because F1 YouTubers, we just curse things like you don't believe.
Well, my crazy prediction is that Valtteri Bottas is not going to finish the season as 23rd. In one of these 3 races, he's going to score a P10. He's going to score 1 point, which will be the only point for staying at 14 this season.
I hope that happens because
And
he doesn't deserve to be as low as he does.
Like a win. So that's kind of wholesome. That's a kind of wholesome way to end this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you all in the next one. And have a great Las Vegas Grand Prix. Josh, thank you very much for your time. It was well worth it. And
no worries.
Take care now. Doei doei.